Continuing on in this chapter, we are on 3.7a. I believe we have one more section before we start preparing for our test next week. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to make you dizzy. But other than that, like I said, today is it's part of a two-part section. Today is absolute value equalities, and tomorrow is absolute value inequalities. Today, again, we're going to look at another modification. The topic isn't extremely tough once you master the main idea of what absolute values do. Let's just take a moment to discuss and remember real fast what they are. The absolute value of a number is the overall amount of the number with no sign. Pretty much it is the distance from zero. So what we learned is that the absolute value of 5 is the number 5. In other words, I don't care if it went up or down 5. I just want to know that it changed by 5. The absolute value of negative 10. I don't care that it went up or down 10. I just care that it changed by 10. The absolute value of 20. I don't care whether it went up or down 20. I just care that it moved by 20. The absolute value of negative 105, same thing. I don't care if it went up 105 or down 105. I just know that it changed by 105. Once we understand this concept, we have a good chance of grasping the main idea of solving absolute value equations. Looking at the essential question, why is this any different from solving general equations? Well, considering the fact absolute value bars convert the value into a number with no sign, it actually leaves us two answers to the following equation. If we were asked if we had the equation of the absolute value of x is 6, the simple answer is that you can put a 6 in here and make it true. But couldn't we also put a negative 6 in here, because the absolute value of negative 6 is also 6? And so whenever you see these things here, you have to remember that this has two answers. And so I guess the main thing you have to make an adjustment to is you have to find both answers, otherwise you do not get it right. So on your quiz this week, whenever you see the absolute value stuff, you're going to have to remember that the absolute value leads to two answers. But again, if you don't find both, you'll be wrong. Translating absolute value just takes two steps. First off, rewrite the problem without the bars. Second off, rewrite without the bars, and then switch the number. That's it. So again, with your absolute value of x equals 6, if you want to write this down, with the part that we had, all you have to do is write it without the bars. That means without the bars, you would write x equals 6. Secondly, if you write it without the bars for the second part where it says rewrite and switch the number, write this side without the bars, write your equals, and switch the number, which means you put a negative 6. That is how you pretty much solve every single absolute value equation. Now understand that solving absolute values is not really using the algebra that you learned how to do. Solving absolute values is just a transition moment. You transition from absolute values to algebra, and once you go to algebra, you start solving the way that you've been taught. So again, translating these problems real fast, only translating them. Again, not solving, but on your homework and on your test and quiz, you're going to have to solve. But here's what we do. Write this problem without bars, then move over, rewrite it without bars, but switch the number. That's all. That would be your two answers. 7 works, negative 7 works. Here, x plus 1, or absolute value of x plus 1 equals 10. Write it without bars. And then secondly, write it without bars, but switch the second number. Now, of course, again, there is more work here, and I want you to put those 3 dots there to indicate that you would do the work that's necessary. You would subtract 1 and get 9, because 9 plus 1 is 10, and the absolute value of 10 is 10. You would also subtract 1 and get negative 11. Negative 11 plus 1 is negative 10, and the absolute value of negative 10 is 10. So you will work this out, but in terms of your notes, we're not going that far. Absolute value 2x plus 3 equals 11. Again, what we're looking at here is rewrite it without the bars, and then rewrite it without the bars, but switch the other number, and that is where we go. Alright. Again, we're not focusing on solving because we should already have that skill under control. And again, if it's not under control, then make sure you continue to ask questions, because again, as much as it may seem like I'm saying things that you don't like to hear, it's just because I'm kind of speaking the truth. But I am always here to help you, as long as you are helping yourself. Again, the only time I have an issue is when you're not helping yourself, and that is when you probably won't like what I have to say. Sometimes other numbers surround the absolute value. When this happens, we must isolate the absolute value before translating it. So I want you to think about, again, these stupid stories that I try to use to help you make sense of things. I want you to think about this as Clark Kent, and Clark Kent turning into Superman. And here's Clark Kent, and Clark Kent had to turn into Superman, twice as strong. Clark Kent had to turn into Superman. Well, Here's the thing. This is Clark Kent. And Clark Kent cannot turn to Superman because there is somebody else around. If there's someone who is not part of who he is, or you know what I mean, like if he's not alone, he never changes. And so what Clark Kent would do is he'd find somewhere private to change into Superman, otherwise they know who he is. And again, I know it's not the most favorite example, but I think it makes sense, at least whenever I look at it, it makes sense the most of anything else, because what's going to happen is you're not going to change it yet because it is 3. So we will use algebra to move the 3 out of the way. We will bring down our x plus 2 with a 7, and now that this is all by itself, we will do x plus 2 equals 7, x plus 2 equals negative 7. Use the algebra that you know to isolate the variable, or to isolate the absolute value. Again, the absolute value will never change around something else. Same thing here. This is Clark Kent, this is your absolute value, but there's a number that doesn't belong. But notice this number is directly attached, and so what we can do is we can divide both of these by 3. We can bring down our absolute value of x minus 2 equals 8, and now we can put x minus 2 equals 8 and x minus 2 equals negative 8 and go from there. Same thing on the third, except there are now 2 people, so you'll use your algebra that you know. If this was 5x minus 6, the first number we would obviously move is to 6. That's why our algebra needs to be skilled, or we need to be at least strong at that right now. So we are going to move the 6 first by adding 6. We bring down 5, we bring down absolute value of 2x plus 3, and we bring down 60. We then will divide by 5, divide by 5, absolute value 2x plus 3 equals 12. And again, now that I have the absolute value by itself, I will do 2x plus 3 equals 12, and 2x plus 3 equals negative 12, and that will go from there. Alright, so final thought, the parts for you to focus on is translating the absolute value equation and isolating the absolute value equation. This was not algebra. Now I know we used algebra to isolate the absolute value part, but that's really not new. The only thing that you really want to make sure you understand is, again, anytime you see an absolute value equation or absolute value bars with a variable on the inside, that you make sure you write it twice, because that's not going to work for you if you don't. So again, if you tack this work with that focus, you'll be fine. The solving portion should not be extremely complex. But like I said, go ahead and go to your Math XL. I do believe all the computers are working today. Go on to your Math XL and go ahead and take care of that. Also, one more thing. If you were working on paper yesterday, make sure you bring me your paper so I can go to your homework while you're working and actually give you the credit for the questions that you answered on paper. Other than that, good luck.